Goldschmidt really heating up. Nolan Arenado really heating up. They just have a lot of guys that are swinging the bat well right now. And like you mentioned, Cole, it's all about getting hot at the right time. They got to continue this over the next week if they want to have a chance, either against the Dodgers or the Giants. But we've seen the Cardinals do really weird stuff. I remember one of my vivid postseason memories is Adams jumping up and down after he hit the home run against Kershaw. Mm-hmm. So you have these opportunities here, and I think the Cardinals absolutely can. I'm not going to predict them to. Mm-hmm. I'm going to hope that they beat whoever they play against because, as upsetting as this Padres season has been for me, there's a 50% chance that the Padres win as many playoff games as either the Giants or the Dodgers. Right. Whoever doesn't win that. I mean, theoretically, if the Cardinals sweep both those teams, like they win the wild card game, they sweep whoever wins the division, Padres have as many playoff games as both those teams. So who's really counting? But right. I think that this Cardinals team is wild. Yeah. They have really talented bullpen arms. So if you get a good start out of whoever, and if it's Adam Wainwright, who's been absolutely unbelievable, he's not going to be a Cy Young finalist in the National League.
He's going to get votes.
He's going to get votes, which is nuts. This dude throws 89 miles an hour. I sat at Petco Park this year watching the COVID-riddled Padres, Ha-Sung Kim, Tommy Pham, and a bunch of other AAA guys who were on a AAA team that won 35 games this year. Just shred him, and now he's going to get Cy Young votes. It's crazy. So, obviously, things have changed since mid-May, but Adam Wainwright, he's been unreal.
Absolutely.
So if you get, 5 or 6 scoreless out of him, you hand the ball off to the bullpen, and you got hard throwers, you got Giovanni Gallegos, you got Alex Reyes, you got a couple other really good arms out there. The Cardinals absolutely could do some damage in October. I think that would be really fascinating. Mm-hmm. But I just wanted to get your guys' opinion. Cole, I think, he can see it. Ryan's strictly on the Dodgers, and I totally respect that because the Dodgers, they're absolutely unreal. So,
well, if I may say, here's the thing. I think that when you look at it, I think it'll be a very close game. And, Cole, you make a great point. You got to get hot at the right time, and that's what the Cardinals are doing. That's the reason why they are in the position that they are in, where they are probably going to keep that second spot and be the second wild card team. But you have to look at what the Dodgers have done all year. They had one slip up yesterday. And I'm saying if the division stays the way it is in the West, in the NL West, and I don't know if it will, there's a chance that it does. But overall, I think that it's going to be a great game regardless of which NL West team is there. But I just see that whichever one of those teams, whether it's the Giants or Dodgers, taking it.
Yeah, and I think something to add as well is, Dom, you mentioned, and I mean, I'm not a huge like fan of buying into the history repeating itself sort of thing, but let's not forget how much success the Cardinals have had in the past against teams like the Dodgers in the postseason. Like it's this team, when you boil it down, they have guys who have experience. They have guys who have been there, just like the Giants. The Giants have guys who have been there. They've played in the postseason. They know what that's like. It's different. It's an elevated atmosphere. And regardless of the situation you're in, whether it's a 1-game playoff or a 5-game series or a 7-game set, regardless of what it is, experience is always going to help you in moments like that. Now, in terms of the managerial situation, it's completely flipped because, we've been used to sort of seeing the Mike Matheny-led Cardinals, bounce on those Dodger teams. And Dave Roberts, who has now, I think, been to the postseason every single year he's been with the Dodgers, he sort of has that experience over Schilt. But regardless, I still think it's going to be it would be an insane game to watch, and it would be just a classic wildcard game. Another guy to highlight, just real quick, who has been really good and surprisingly good over this stretch has been Harrison Bader, a guy who's classically not the best hitter. I think that's been pretty obvious for a long time. Really good defender. Over the last 15 games, he's batting .386 with 4 homers, and that's big in terms because he's not a power guy. He's not. But just like Tyler O'Neill, just like Paul Goldschmidt, he's been hitting for power and he's been driving in runs, and he's been a key part of this winning streak. And that's, again, it's going to really matter come down to the postseason.
He's already a good player because of his defense, but the fact that Bader's actually been hitting brings a whole nother dynamic. And they're a very right-handed heavy lineup, but I don't think that's really going to matter, especially if you face the Dodgers in that 5-game series, and that's who you end up facing. You're going to face Kershaw and Urias. There's 2 lefties right there. And 2 of the 4 or 5 games, and then I mean you'd probably face Bueller or Scherzer the second time around. So, and then the Giants, their rotation is pretty right-handed heavy. So
Yeah.
I think those are some interesting things to look at. But
Also, just to look at it, over the past 30 days, the Cardinals have 3 guys hitting over 310. One of them being O'Neill, then one being Goldschmidt, and both of those guys have an OPS over 1. So they've been really carrying the load offensively, really getting them to that spot as they've combined for 21 homers as well. So they have turned it up offensively. What it comes down to is, can the starting rotation get 6 good innings against one of the top 2 teams in baseball and get it to the bullpen where they've actually been very successful.
And their bullpen, they locked down the Padres in game 1 of the wild card round last year. Game 2, they got hit around hard because they'd already seen the guys the day before. And then game 3, they were fine. I think they allowed 2 runs over. They allowed 1 run over 3 innings, and it was earned. And then they allowed 2 other unearned runs. So the Cardinals, they've been there. The Giants, a lot of those guys have been there. The Dodgers, every single one of them's been there. It's fascinating, and that's why that little portion of whoever the Cardinals, assuming the Cardinals don't just totally blow it. I mean, they're up 6 games to play. I don't want to say we've seen weirder things happen because I think that would be the weirdest thing we've ever seen happen. But I do think that you can kind of you can pencil the Cardinals in there right now, and whoever wins that wild card game based on whoever loses the division, I think those 3 teams are way more fascinating because you get the Brewers, who are the far superior team to the Atlanta Braves. We'll talk about that a little bit next week. But the NL West, I mean, we're looking at it, and no one thought it was going to come down to the Giants and the Dodgers at this point. They both, as of today, and the Giants reached it earlier this week, have reached the 100-win plateau, and it looks like the only other team in baseball that's going to join them is the Rays, and they have to win 3 games this upcoming week. The Brewers would have to win all 6 of their games, so that will likely not happening, especially considering the fact that they're playing the Cardinals this upcoming week. But Giants, Dodgers, the Giants, they get the Diamondbacks to start the week. It's going to be Madison Bumgarner's first start in San Francisco in front of fans, not wearing a Giants uniform, so that's going to be really weird.
Yeah.
And then the Dodgers, they get the Padres to start the week. And then the Giants to end the season will get the Padres. And then the Dodgers, I'm pulling it up right now.
Dodgers have the Brewers
They have the Brewers.
to end the season.
Right.
So Dodgers have a tough last stretch.
And the Giants, they get to face the worst team in the National League at 50 wins in the Diamondbacks. But they do get to face Bumgarner, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah.
And then you also get to face the Padres, who will have nothing to for.
Right.
Play spoilers. Why not? Go for it.
I mean, the Padres are playing to stay above 500, which is extremely sad. But there is that if you would consider that something.
At least your team has had hope of being over 500 this year.
Yeah, but I mean, considering what the expectations were,
I know. I'm just trying to help you out. Give you some.
It's all right. The season ended on Tuesday when the Padres lost to the Giants, and I mean the Cardinals have kept winning, so it didn't really matter what the Padres did.
You have a point.
The season really ended last Saturday when Emilio Pagan allowed a 2-run home run to Tyler O'Neill.
Yeah.
Anyways, enough about the Padres. We'll talk about them in a little bit. But Giants, Dodgers. The Giants, they won the season series. So even if these 2 teams tie, they would host game 163, which would be crucial because then the loser would have to turn around and host, penciling in the Cardinals there. Do we see the Dodgers catching up? Because, I mean, we all know that how talented the Dodgers are. They easily could, but Cole, do you think the Dodgers are going to catch up to them? Do you think the Giants are going to hold on and be NL West champs?
It's last week. I was able to sit here and say, like a little bit more definitively, okay, the Giants have this locked, but they're really they're having to win games almost every single night, especially over this last week because the Dodgers have had, they had Arizona this weekend. Like that's not the most favorable matchup for Arizona. And so, sitting here now, it's really tough to say. I think given how tough the week is, or how much more significantly tough the week is for the Dodgers than it is for the Giants, I think the Giants hang on, but I could easily see by 2 days from now, the Dodgers are now are tied for first in the division. That's how this works. Obviously, it's crazy, but I think the Giants hang on. I just think that we've already mentioned sort of like what the next week's going to look like, and I just think that San Francisco has just a much more favorable schedule for the rest of the way. And I think as long as they go above 500 this week, I think they'll be fine. But it's really tough to say. It really is.
Yeah, if you had told me going into this week that it was going to be a one game difference between the two, I would say the Dodgers still have a real legit chance, and they still do. But I think the way that they end the season against the NL Central champions and going against the Brewers is what's going to cost them from getting the division. And I cannot believe that the Dodgers, who are going to win 100 games once again, are not going to win the division. That's just how good the San Francisco Giants have been all year long. They still got to take care of business, but they're facing the worst team in baseball in the Arizona Diamondbacks, and then they go ahead and face a insanely struggling Padres team that, you know what, if they play spoilers, then that would be awesome. But this Giants team is just on a roll, and they have been all year long. So it would have to be a couple bad losses for the Giants for the Dodgers to sneak in and take the division.
And I find it really fascinating because the Dodgers are going to end with the Brewers, and the Brewers are locked to seed. I guess, yeah, they're locked in at the 2 seed, and they've already won the division. They can't be the 3 seed. They can't be the 1 seed. So they all of a sudden don't have anything to play for against the Los Angeles Dodgers.
Right.
So the 2 teams, I guess the 2 teams that these 2 teams are playing against don't have anything to play for.
Right.
And if you're the Brewers, you're not going to want to throw stuff out at the Dodgers and let them see stuff.
Right.
Like if you've got guys that can, go out there that, you don't expect to be a big part of your postseason, you're going to want to put them out there and do that. You're also going to want to try and save your rotation to line it up so that you go Burns, Woodruff, Peralta against the Braves. So the chances of you seeing those guys, if you're the Dodgers, I think all of a sudden goes down. It's a really interesting dynamic here. Mm-hmm. I just don't know how these teams are going to react. Like guys on the Diamondbacks, they're going to be fighting for jobs, and they also don't want to have the worst record in baseball because the Baltimore Orioles are also 50-106. So obviously, if you're the Arizona Diamondbacks front office, you're like, please lose, but you're not going to tell your guys to go out there and lose because
of course not.
These guys have jobs, and they don't want to lose, and they're trying to play for their jobs next year. And the guys that have come up through the minor leagues, they like being up here to the major leagues a lot. I think that goes without saying, and they want to stay up here. So those guys have something to prove. And some of the Padres guys are in that same spot too. So it'll be interesting to see how the opposing teams react because the Giants and the Dodgers, they're going to want to go out there full blood, and they're going to go out there and they're going to try and win there. The Astros, they have a 5-game lead over the Mariners. They're going to win the division there. Despite losing 4 straight, the Oakland Athletics swept the Astros. That kind of keeps them in things. The White Sox, they've clinched the division. The Rays, they've clinched the division. White Sox and Astros currently separated by 3 games, so I think you can pencil in the Astros are going to be the 2 seed, and the White Sox are going to be the 3 seed, barring a collapse from the Astros. But looking at the American League wildcard, this is where things are really interesting here. We talked about it. The Red Sox and Yankees, they're playing on Sunday Night Baseball. As we speak right now, Yankees currently up 2-1 in the 7th inning. The Red Sox, they are currently tied with the Yankees for the top wildcard spot. The Yankees have the second wildcard spot by de facto. Mm-hmm. Those 2 teams, they're going to be separated by the end of the night. So that'll be interesting. The Blue Jays currently sit a game and a half back of the Yankees and the Red Sox, so they'll be a game behind no matter what happens tonight. The Mariners are 2.5 back, and the A's are 3.5 back. So how do we see this all playing out? Obviously, it's really tough to say with this Yankees-Red Sox game going on right now, but just pretend that doesn't matter. Cole, how do you see the Red Sox, Yankees, Blue Jays, and Mariners aligning?
Yeah, and God, it's still a mess. It's crazy. The Blue Jays, I think, are still see the problem with Toronto, and again with such a crazy race. The problem with Toronto is a week ago they were riding high, but now it's like, you know, they're still. I mean, you know, they've won 2 straight, but they've tapered off a little bit, and the Yankees are, you know, back in it, and so you can't let that happen. I think. I mean, it's really tough to say. I think the way New York is really playing, you know, you talk about playing for your jobs and stuff like that. If there's any team that has not only a whole, I mean, honestly, I'd say the whole roster, including Aaron Boone, and, you know, with the expectations that were put on that team at the beginning of the season, that entire organization is playing for keeps next year. And they're doing everything they can to get in the postseason. And they have that look right now where it's like, you're going to have to drag them out of the wild card spot if you even want a chance to top them. So, I mean, again, it's a heck of a difference that a week makes, but it really looks like the Yankees, who have come into Fenway and have played well this weekend, are probably going to. I'm not. I mean, obviously, they're not going to run away with it. We'll see how things go for Toronto. I mean, I think they've still played well, but again, you know, they've tapered off, and it's like, you know, you gotta keep winning, especially if you're teetering, you know, you're a borderline playoff team. You have to keep winning. You have to keep hanging on, because it gets super crucial at this time of year, and you know, that's one of those things where if they find a way in by some chance, you know, it's still, I mean, it's still going to be pretty tough to say how things are really going to shape out for them. I mean, you look at the remainder of their schedule, they have a day off tomorrow. And then they've got a 3-game set against the Yankees. That's going to be the decider of their season. I think if they can win that series, or if at least win it, and then go into their final series of the year against Baltimore and also win that, or I mean, ideally you would want to sweep. Then they'll get in, but it's really going to come down to that series against the Yankees here in the middle of the week. That's going to decide the season for both of those teams, I think.
Yeah, looking at it, what the Yankees have done the past few days, if they can pull out the win tonight, they would sweep the Red Sox and win 6 in a row, which would give them a 1-game lead over the Red Sox for that top spot. But looking at the final 6 games for each, the Yankees have a much tougher end. They got to go against the Blue Jays, who they are battling with for one of those final spots in the wild card, and then the division winner in the Rays. Then you got to look at the Red Sox schedule. They face one of the worst teams in baseball in the Orioles, and then also the Nationals. So the Red Sox have an opportunity to where, with how their schedule ends, they can really separate themselves from the rest of the pack to take that top spot just because of who they face, but they got to take care of business. As for the Yankees, they have to, I say, take at least 2 out of 3 from the Blue Jays to where they can feel comfortable going into that final series against the Rays, even though the Rays don't have a lot to play for because they've already.
Yeah, the Rays are going to have nothing to play for.
Yeah, and they've won, and they've got the top seed. The Yankees, that series is crucial, so it's going to come down to, I believe, I agree with you, Cole. I think it's going to come down to the series between the Yankees and Blue Jays at the start of this week.
Right, and I mean, you could see the Yankees eliminate the Blue Jays from postseason contention. I mean, if they win 2 out of 3 there, all of a sudden they're done. So, I mean, it's just going to be wild because this is everything. Yeah. This is everything that we hope for. Several teams that are also going to be playing against each other in the final weeks, in this instance, week of baseball, playing against each other, playing against bad teams, some teams playing against good teams. Yep. You got to find a way to, you know, grind out those wins against the good teams, but you also don't want to trip up and fall to the bad teams. So the Blue Jays, they haven't been doing themselves any favors after they were on a tear to start the month.
Yeah.
It's just a really fascinating race because you've got just such different teams here. When in the NL, you kind of see like similar styles of baseball, but here in the AL wildcard race, it's wild. All right, that is going to wrap up our standings talk. We're going to go to a very quick break here on BlazeRadioOnline.com. We'll be back in just over 50 seconds where I'll talk about the Padres.
Are you interested in sports talk radio?
To bring up some of that.
Yes, and I probably should have brought this up earlier, but one thing to keep in mind, just to wrap up sort of the standings talk, and specifically with the Blue Jays and the Yankees in that series, again being very critical this week. Just something to look at. Toronto is 10-6 against the Yankees this year. They have a positive 9-run differential. They've actually played really well against the division this entire season. They've competed against Boston. While they have only won, they're under 500 against Boston, but they've played really well against them, against Tampa Bay, but they've played the best against the Yankees and the Orioles, and those are the two teams they're facing this week. So I think that kind of really lines up well for them this week, especially when it comes to their playoff odds. But just something to keep in mind, just a little food for thought there. That's, again, another interesting aspect heading into the week.
As if there needed to be anything more interesting going into this final week, especially over there in the American League East. All right, so I get to talk about the Padres for a little bit, and then you guys get to respond here. Obviously, the Padres, one of the World Series favorites coming into the year, and before the final week of the season even comes to play, Padres, they're eliminated from playoff contention. I think the main word that comes to mind is disappointing, and this year wouldn't have felt any different than any of the year had the Padres not come in with sky-high expectations, which, honestly, it wasn't like the fan base was just hyping the team up like some fan bases like to do. I mean, national writers were picking the Padres to win the World Series, and that's why I didn't feel that dumb when I picked the Padres to win the World Series. Does that make me feel worse as a fan? No. Does it make me feel stupid? No, because the rotation was supposed to be better, the lineup was supposed to be better, and the bullpen, which ended up expectations for the most part, ended up having to carry the team for a wide portion of the season, and then eventually it catered off once some of the guys were overused, and a lot of the guys just had a lot of wear and tear, and at some points, guys were pitching in roles that they didn't need to pitch in because other pitchers were injured. I think it was disappointing was the word that I would use. And a lot of talk around why this team was better was the coaching staff and the coaching by Jace Tingler. It was better than what it had been before in the Padres world. Hitting coaches had been a revolving door. There had been, I think, 6 hitting coaches in the last 6 years for the Padres. And then Damian Easley comes in last year. All of a sudden, the team is so much more disciplined. They're getting on base at great clips. They're hitting the ball harder than they ever have before. And then this year comes around. And at the midway point through the season, the offense just fell apart. It was a lot of ground balls. It was a lot of weak pop flies. It was a lot of strikeouts, chasing out of the zone. Just felt like everything the Padres had ever done was being thrown out the window. Larry Rothschild, a pitching coach who's very well renowned, got fired by a Yankees team that won over 100 games. And the Padres, they moved on from their longtime pitching coach, Darren Balsley, to bring in Rothschild. And some guys saw some very good improvements in 2020. Some of them saw some declines. And then some guys who were very highly touted pitchers get traded for. Yu Darvish, all of a sudden, he falls off. Injuries concerns, sticky substance concerns leading up to that. Blake Snell was horrible up until the point where the Padres fired Larry Rothschild. Some guys out of the bullpen, Emilio Pagan, who was the closer for one of the best bullpens in baseball for the Rays. He comes in, has 2 disappointing years for the Padres. Just a lot of players that were being totally misused. And the coaching staff that once was talked about as being much better, much more improved, it seems like this coaching staff has completely failed the San Diego Padres. Manny Machado had more errors this year after a really good start. He had a shoulder injury. All of a sudden, he starts making a ton of errors. Fernando Tatis Jr. leads all National League shortstops in errors by a mile. Errors, they aren't a great way to evaluate Fernando Tatis Jr. because some of the defensive metrics say that he's had an average year, but error-wise, he's made a lot of costly plays that have cost the Padres runs. Jake Cronenworth, he's the exception. Eric Hosmer, a fielder who won Gold Gloves. Say what you will about that in Kansas City. He comes in for the Padres first 2 years, train wreck defensively. Bobby Dickerson, who worked with a lot of infielders in Baltimore and Philadelphia, in Seattle, saw improvements defensively. A lot of the Padres guys, we didn't see that this year. So all of a sudden you're starting to look at that and say, well, where are these guys coming from? Trent Grisham, down year, obviously some injuries. Will Myers, down year. Tommy Pham, very up and down year. And you start looking around. The coaching staff, they're getting a ton of the blame there, and I think that was concerning. I think a lot of the coaching staff is unfortunately gone after this year because all of a sudden, as of today, September 26th, the Padres, which were once 17 games above 500 just a month and a half ago, all of a sudden are 500 and have the two teams that are fighting for the best record in baseball, fighting for the division crown up in this upcoming week in their final 6 games, likely to finish below 500 unless the Padres finish the week above 500. So it's concerning. I don't know where the Padres are going to move on from some of these coaches. I don't necessarily know, but I do think a lot of organizational changes are going to happen. We've already seen scouting directors be fired. We've seen some scouts get fired. Farm directors have changed roles. Everything that seemed like it was getting turned around all of a sudden didn't. And a team that has arguably the best shortstop in baseball, one of the best third basemen in baseball. You've got a really talented, young, slugging second baseman / first baseman. You've got a first baseman that you're paying almost $150 million. You got an outfielder who's been an all-star before, received MVP votes last year. You got a Gold Glove center fielder. You've got Tommy Pham, who had never been on a team that had won less than 55% of games. And all of a sudden, this team has just totally fallen apart. You've got what was supposed to be one of the best pitching rotations, and it just hasn't been that. So a lot of changes are going to be happening. It's just been disappointing, and I don't know where the Padres go from here, but it's concerning. Obviously, there's a lot of talent on the team still, so they could very easily turn this around in 1 year. But you're a fan of an NL West divisional rival for the Padres. I mean, what are your thoughts on what has gone down?
Yeah, and to start, and to sort of give a little benefit of the doubt, if this does not prove why the NL West is the toughest division, not even just in baseball, but in one of the toughest divisions in sports to play in, if this doesn't prove that, I don't know what does. They changed so much heading into this season. They sold out to get top end starters in Darvish and Snell. They added, a bunch of pieces. They sort of, added to the coaching staff. They still have an incredible farm system. And this has really been in the making since the beginning of 2020. They had the big trade deadline last year. We talked a lot about that. And that's where this cultural shift in terms of this division started. And to be completely honest, from my perspective, that still hasn't really changed. And as much hype as this team has or had, whether that's been lost or not, I still think is deserved because of the strides they've taken over the last 2 years have been monumental. And that more than a lot of people do. And that in itself is huge. But again, it proves just why this division is so tough to play in. Nobody predicted the Giants to be as good as they were. The Dodgers, everybody knew they were going to be a 100-plus win team. They're second place in the division. If you were to tell people that in April, they would call you crazy. They would call you crazy. And they would call you even crazier if you told them the Giants were going to run away with it. And it's that kind of, it's those kind of things where it's almost like random, random sample. You have no idea what's going to happen in a given season. I think really what hurt this team is the deadline. And, they had depth problems. They were injury riddled. They just looked a little tired and beat up at that point in the season. They needed depth in the starting rotation. They missed out on Scherzer. They had a chance at Barrios. He slipped through their fingers. They just kind of muffed it, if you will. And Adam Frazier has not been good for them. That was a depth piece that I think a lot of people were excited about, including myself coming in. And he just didn't really live up to what he was in Pittsburgh. And again, like, you can't predict those things. That's baseball. That's just how it works. That's this game that we know and love. And in my opinion, the drop off, yes, has been significant, but it hasn't been like this team has just given up. I think this team has always wanted to be in it. They've been in it. They've competed. They just look tired. They just look beat up, and the lack of depth. I don't know if there was ever a lack of depth, but between the injuries and things that have happened over the course of the season, this team just looks tired. They just look sort of a lot more like a product of last year's season, 60 games, compared to this year where they're playing almost triple of that. I think this team's going to be right back in the mix next year. Regardless of what they do at the top in the front office, changes with the coaching staff, Preller's probably going to get aggressive again with off-season moves, and I think that that's a fundamental part of this team. It's part of what makes them good, and they shouldn't stop taking those risks. This team is still going to be, for many, many years, in my opinion, a force to be reckoned with in this division. And I think it's really just looking forward to next year. They're going to have Mike Clevenger back healthy next year. That rotation that at the beginning of the year on paper looked really, really good is going to look even better next year. And you're going to have a lot more guys to tinker with. And, it's a good problem to have when you have that kind of depth returning after injury and stuff like that. But they've got to figure things out with Darvish. I think Blake Snell, ever since Rothschild left, like you said, has sort of figured it out. I think Joe Musgrove has been incredible this year. Hopefully he can continue that. He's been a major bright spot for them. And you have franchise pieces within this organization, Machado and Tatis, who are only going to continue to produce and get better. So I'm not really concerned about their future at all, because their future, I think, is still incredibly bright. I just think that this season has really gotten to them after what happened last year. And I think it, again, just goes to show the incredible depth and the incredible, job that this division does to compete with itself and stay relevant and competitive, in a word. So, I mean, yeah, it stinks, but this team's going to be back next year. I firmly believe that.
And I go to sleep wondering every night, what is the season like if the Padres get Max Scherzer and he's not a Los Angeles Dodger, because he's been probably the best pitcher in baseball since the trade deadline. And if he was on the Padres and not the Dodgers, that definitely makes a huge difference, because at the trade deadline, the Padres were only 3 games back. They were right there with the Giants and the Dodgers, but it's been a completely different story for both those two teams.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know the Padres are going to be fine. It's just whether or not they can make the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
They, like you said, they have the pieces to still make it back. And Clevenger coming back healthy next year is going to be a huge wild card for the team, because second Tommy John surgery, he's been throwing. He's on track to come back, but we'll never know. Ryan, what are your thoughts on the Padres' performance this year? Are you concerned at all and whatnot?
I'm not concerned one bit with the Padres, because you still have arguably the best shortstop in baseball, a premier third baseman, a very promising second baseman, utility man in Adam Frazier. Still got Cronenworth. The one thing that I think really hit them was that the bullpen just got really taxed throughout the year. and injuries came to hit them. But I think next year, you mentioned Mike Levenger, Cole, but Denelson Lamet, I think, could re-enter the starting rotation next year. Getting him back, I think, will help, which might move Chris Paddock to the bullpen, but I don't think Padres fans would be too upset about that. But the thing is, they just fell apart in August. I can't remember what their record has been since August 11th, but that's where it all started.
It's the worst in the National League. Yes, that is worse than the Diamondbacks, worse than the Pirates, worse than the Cubs, who sold their entire team at the trade deadline. It's been bad since the day I left the state of California. It's been bad
since the beginning of the second half.
Last time I checked last week, the Padres' second half record was 25-38.
Yeah.
I think it has gone worse, but here's the thing: they've still got so much talent on that team. Still got Darvish. He still got to figure some stuff out. Got Snell, who has seemed to figure it out since Rothschild was fired. Getting Clevenger back, got Lamet. You still got Musgrove, who has looked really good since they traded for him this year. Hey, you can still look that he set franchise history this year with the first no-hitter. So those are the good takeaways. Overall, I think the lineup also has been underwhelming when you get to towards the back half of it, looking at guys like Tommy Pham, Trent Grisham, Will Myers, and Caratini. I know Caratini is the guy behind the plate for Darvish, and Austin Nola has been hurt throughout the course of the year. But those guys have not been able to put up the numbers that you would expect them to put up. So, plus Adam Frazier has not been as great as people expected him to be once they traded for him, like Cole said. But looking at the future, that core is still there. And you trade for Adam Frazier, who still has, is it 1 year left on his deal, then arbitration?
Well, I mean, it's his final year of arbitration.
Yeah.
Okay, final year of arbitration. Okay. So
got him for a year. I assume. I mean, the offseason is going to be wild because Eric Hosmer, I mean, he's been a complete disaster at first base for the Padres, with the exception of his 39 games in the shortened 2020 season where he didn't hit ground balls as much, and he had a career best slugging percentage, one of his best hitting years. Like, wow, he had his best year there. He didn't do that this year. He had stretches where he was a really good hitter for the Padres, and they're early on in the season. There were times where he just, at any time he came up with a runner on scoring position and 2 outs, you're like, this guy's getting driven in. But ever since then, it hasn't been good for him. What did the Padres do with him? Because he's still owed $24 million next year, and then $18 million for the next for each of the next 3 years following that. And Scott Boras, who we all know, the best and most high-profile agent for Major League Baseball players. He represents Eric Hosmer, and in his deal, he got the 5 and 10 rights, which means that Eric Hosmer has he can waive his trades.
Yeah,
so
if
the Padres don't trade Eric Hosmer this offseason or at the trade deadline, he has a no-trade clause until his contract ends.
Which means he's
yeah, and I can basically only assume that Eric Hosmer is going to continue to get worse as his contract goes on. Now, there are exceptions, Joey Votto having a career year, Brandon Belt having a career year. So he can make adjustments. It's whether or not they want to trade him because all of a sudden you have 5 infielders that are all like pretty worthy of playing time.
Yeah.
That includes Eric Hosmer, by the way, because you have Machado, Tatis, Cronenworth, Frazier, and Hosmer all fighting for spots. You also have Ha-Sung Kim.
Yeah, I was about to ask about Kim.
3 years left on his deal. So the Padres are going to have to find a way to trade him, whatever you have to give up there.
The question is, what team can they trade him to that will pay that contract?
And I think
that's where the question is, and that's where I think the biggest hurdle is. What team is willing to give him $24 million, then 18 over the next 3 years?
The Padres might include some money in there, throw in some prospects to make the team.
They would have to throw in some cash. They have to.
So the offseason is going to be really exciting for the Padres fans. Obviously, not for the reasons that this past offseason was super exciting for Padres fans when they acquired Yu Darvish and Blake Snell within 24 hours. Later signed, they signed Ha-Sung Kim in that same time period as well, and then later traded for Joe Musgrove. So it's going to be fascinating. I still think the team is in position to win, especially considering
for sure. There's no doubt about that.
And the Giants, they're going to lose a ton of players to free agency. Kevin Gausman, Brandon Belt. They already signed Brandon Crawford. a lot of the guys in their bullpen, they only signed a 1-year deal. Right. So they are losing some talent there. And the Dodgers, they have some very high-profile free agents. They're obviously going to keep some of them. And same with the Giants, they're going to keep some of their guys too. But Kershaw, he's a free agent. Max Scherzer, he's a free agent. Kenley Jansen, he's a free agent. AJ Pollock, he's a free agent.
They'll let Pollock walk.
Yeah. Corey Seager's a free agent. I agree. They'll probably let Pollock walk. Corey Seager's a free agent. I already said Kenley Jansen, right?
Yeah.
I feel like Jansen could walk as well.
And here's a guy that I think is flying under the radar, and we kind of saw a guy like him go be a free agent. It's Chris Taylor. Kike Hernandez left the Dodgers.
He was an all-star this year.
Chris Taylor was an all-star this year. And he's not an everyday player for them. He mostly is, but he doesn't play every day.
Hasn't he also been hurt with a neck injury, or has that been Pollock? I can't remember which one it was.
Pollock's the guy that's
Pollock.
It's not probably. It is AJ Pollock. And Chris Taylor, he's been one of those guys that can play all over the field. Yep. And it's the type of guys like that have helped the Dodgers succeed. So I'm not saying the Dodgers are going to be bad. Do not get me twisted on this. But
if I may say something, I think there is a direct factor if they re-sign Chris Taylor.
Yeah.
If they are able to keep Seager, then I think they might let Taylor walk because they can put Lux in left field, which is what they've been experimenting with throughout this second half since they acquired Seager. So that's another thing to look at as well. Pitching-wise, I don't think they're going to let Kershaw nor Scherzer walk. So
they have a very fascinating offseason. All three of these teams do for very different reasons.
Remember, it's the Dodgers. They have all the money in the world.
And that's the thing is, you look at these at the playoff race now, and then you look at, by the end of the offseason, come the start of next season, there's going to be shifting. There's going to be things that change. Who
100%.
knows? The Giants might be significantly weaker than they were coming into this season at the start of next year. And they, could live up to the expectation that was set for them this year, next year, which is, I think it was no more than 75 wins. And that's sort of the thing where you have to recognize that, and I'm sure that Padres do. And if they are able to add in, okay, this worked out for us that's how baseball in the offseason works. This worked out for us last year. This didn't. How do we improve in this area? We need to add this, and when you do those things and they work out immensely, and you start to win more games, and you get into positions like, where the Dodgers have been for years when you continuously add depth. They're not going anywhere. I mean, that's obvious, regardless of how interesting their offseason is. But the goal, I think, for San Diego is to set realistic expectations and to be like, okay, this is where we were this year, and this is what didn't work. We need to make sure if it's a front office thing, then that needs to happen right away. The one thing that you can never discount with them, especially in terms of, when they go out and acquire guys, is they're aggressive. They're willing to make the changes. And those changes will be made if need be. They're not going to sit around and wait. And I'm very certain that they'll be back in the thick of things come next year.
I appreciate you guys' honesty. You're making me feel a lot better. The last month and a half has been a rough time to be a Padres fan. There's still a lot of talent here. I never said that there wasn't.
Oh, easily.
It's going to be interesting to see who bounces back, see if Fernando Tatis Jr. and Manny Machado can have seasons like they have. Fernando should be a top 3 MVP vote getter. Manny Machado, he should get some top 10 votes. He might not finish in the top 10, but he should get some votes. 30 home runs, 100 RBIs, and playing fairly solid defense. Already talked about the errors. He should get some top 10 MVP votes. It's going to be fascinating for this offseason, and knowing that there's probably going to be a chip on their shoulders next year. Who's gonna bounce back? All right, we're going to go to a very quick commercial break for about 45 seconds. And we're going to wrap up our discussion with one of the big headlines this week, which was the incident involving the Tampa Bay Rays and the Toronto Blue Jays. We'll be back in 45 seconds.
This is Oprah, and you're listening to Blaze Radio. Broadcasted at the Bill Austin Studio. You get Blaze Radio. You get Blaze Radio. Everybody gets Blaze Radio.
Put my stuff in Jello again.
But I'm sorry, because I've always been your biggest fan.
Dwight falls for mainstream radio every time.
Where is my desk? It's totally unprofessional.
Okay, well, you're the one who lost the desk. I didn't lose my desk. Okay, calm down. Where was the last place you saw it?
Don't be fooled. Tune into Blaze Radio, ASU's local student station on Blaze Radio
All right, welcome back to the Golden Sombrero Show on BlazeRadioOnline.com. I'm Dominic Stern, joined by Ryan Blank and Cole Bradley. We got about 8 more minutes left on the show. We're going to talk about the incident that happened this past week between the Rays and the Blue Jays. So basically,
Before that, can I give a quick update?
sure.
The Red Sox have actually come back,
Oh,
and a huge error made by Joey Gallo in left on a fly ball gave them the lead. So the Red Sox are now up 3-2 in the top of the 8th.
Yeah.
thank you. I did not realize that. My thing at the top of my standings has the score of the Packers and 49ers game, but
Is it still 17-0?
it is, but the 49ers are the ball at the goal line, so I'd assume they're going to score. We're not watching that. We're not caring about that. I just have the score open, so
Today may be NFL Sunday, but it is also Stern Sunday on
It is.
Blaze Radio that starts with baseball on the Golden Sombrero Show.
It is Stern Sunday. I'm not sure what I did to deserve 2 shows during Sunday Night Football, during Sunday Night Football, and Sunday Night Baseball too. But that's what happened. So yeah, you can also catch me on the College Basketball Bonanza after the show with my host Nick Hodel. So, anyways, back to Blue Jays Rays. This past week, these two teams faced off. Very high action series. You know, the Blue Jays, they're fighting for a playoff spot. The Rays are fighting for their division. And Kevin Kiermaier, he got thrown out at home, tagged out by Alejandro Kirk. And, you know, catchers, they got their sign sheet on their wristband. And in there's some signs there that they can see. And when Kirk went to tag Kiermaier, he got him out. But his sheet fell out of the sleeve. And Kevin Kiermaier, you know, he's got his own sleeve sheet. He's got his own thing in his pocket. He just picked it up, or at least this is what he says. He picks up Kirk's sheet. It goes back in the dugout with the sheet, and the Blue Jays find out about this, and they're angry because, I mean, the Rays, they will use any advantage they can to get over you, and they certainly used this. We don't know to the extent of what they've used it. They seemingly said, like, hey, we took the sheet, and we're not going to tell you what we did with it. You know, what do you guys make of the whole situation? We'll talk about Kiermaier getting hit in a little bit, but Cole, what do you think of this?
Well, I mean, it's gonna, if these two teams play, all I'll say is this is, obviously both of these teams are in playoff contention, the Rays being obviously in it, and Toronto has a chance to find their way into the postseason. And if they do get in and these teams by some chance square off, it's going to be a fun series to watch, especially because of what transpired. With that being said, and it's one of those situations where it's like, you know, you're in the heat of the moment, and, you know, you can say something that's going to rub someone the wrong way. You can do something that's going to do the same thing. And obviously, I think I really look back, the Astros, the whole thing that happened to the Astros with the sign stealing scandal and things like that is always going to put sort of is always going to loom large in situations like this, because it's like sort of the low point for baseball. Like, this is what happened, and that was so frowned upon when it was found out. And obviously how baseball works is you're looking to get any advantage you can over the course of a game, over the course of a series, over the course of a season, that's going to push you or separate you from the rest. This is, it's in that gray area. I personally think it's, you know, if he's going to go and say, you know, if we don't know what they did with it or whatever, like, it's very weird. I don't know if it's the wrong thing. I personally think it's a little bit over the top to do that again after, you know, things with like the Astros that have happened, because you're always going to look back at that. That was like, that's the extreme case, but that sort of sets the bar for situations like this. And I think I personally wouldn't have done it. I would have probably just been like, oh, you need this. Like, as a catcher, you need this to call balls and strikes, or else, I mean, you know, you can't compete with us. And for the sake of competition, you know, here you go. Like, you drop this or whatever. But, you know, again, heat of the moment, you know, certain things are going to push you to do things that you don't normally do. So that's the way I see it. It's a very complicated situation. I'm just looking forward to, if these two teams were to square off, in the postseason because you know it's going to get heated.
All right, here's how I'm going to take this. I don't see anything wrong with it, honestly. Because here's the thing. It's a competitive advantage. If he doesn't want to pick up the card, maybe do a better job of protecting it. I know it's a free play where it comes out. And maybe even Kiermaier thought when he picked it up it was his and it fell out of his pocket, whatever. But here's the thing. I don't think that it is as big of a deal as people are making it. Because teams want to get that competitive advantage, see how the defense is going to play your teammates. You want to get that competitive advantage. I don't personally see anything wrong with it. You guys can disagree with me all you want, because that's just how I feel about it. But I'd be getting a little bit ahead. But I don't think Barucki should have thrown at Kiermaier. I think that you have to realize teams are going to do whatever it takes to win, and that's what Kiermaier was doing. And I think that if any Blue Jay was in that situation that Kiermaier was in, they would have done the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think your point about saying, hey, a Blue Jays player probably would have done the same thing. Say Mike Zunino tagged out their center fielder, George Springer at home plate, and then all of a sudden George Springer picks up Zunino's card. I think that's a good point, and I think it's really tough to criticize Kevin Kiermaier here. And like I said, we don't know the extent to which this card was used by the Rays, like in terms of like scouting, whether they looked at it. I mean, we don't really know. That's what I think is super fascinating about this, because the story came out. Cole, you mentioned the Astros cheating. The story came out about the Astros. Like those details, they were revealed. So I think that is certainly something interesting to follow. And we're out of time, so we're not going to be able to, Cole and I, discuss them retaliating and hitting Kevin Kiermaier with a pitch. But we thank you all for tuning in to the Golden Sombrero Show on this fine Sunday. Next time we come back to you, we'll have the playoff picture. We're going to come back with our full MLB playoff predictions. We thank you all for tuning in to the Golden Sombrero Show on BlazeRadioOnline.com. On behalf of Cole Bradley and Ryan Blank, we thank you all, and have a good rest of your Sunday.